Welcome back, everybody, to the F1 podcast. It is Andrew Cleary alongside Erica Hollingsworth. How you doing today, Erica?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. And this is season 3, episode 14 of the F1 podcast. Today, we're going to be doing a little bit of a little preview because, it is our home Grand Prix this weekend for Erica and myself.
Yeah, betcha.
Friggin' rights it is. Canadian Grand Prix preview with a little bit of our predictions for the week and the week that was. But unfortunately, our other co-host, John Ricci, cannot be making it to the podcast episode today. He is currently getting ready for Montreal.
So jealous. We had such a good time last year. I'm sad I can't go back this year, but we know Ricci's going to enjoy himself and have a great time with some of the other folks we've met up with in the past.
Exactly. No, I'm very jealous that Ricci is going. And if you want to meet the F1 podcast this week, Jonathan Ricci is going to be going with Tyler and Spencer, friends from the show, and he will now tell you about how you can meet the F1 podcast this weekend in Montreal.
Thanks, Andrew and Erica. I really appreciate you guys stepping up as I get ready for Montreal. As they both mentioned, I will be at the Canadian Grand Prix this weekend alongside some of our listeners, Tyler Hathroll, Spencer Maybe, and Morgan Panabaker. Great people, and we're going to have so much fun in the Lance Stroll / hairpin section. We're going to be there all weekend long, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And as well as we're going to be out in Montreal at nighttime. So if you want to meet up with us, and we would love to meet some fans, do some interviews, get some photos, sign some autographs, please hit us up on our Instagram page at f1.podcast, and I'll be monitoring it all weekend. Looking forward to the celebrations and hopefully a Ferrari win, but I'll bring it back to the team to finish this off. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Ricci, for that. So, Erica, I think today would be a good, since this is our home GP, I think we should talk a little bit about the history, our predictions for the weekend, and then there were some spicy comments made by some F1 drivers this weekend and F1 team personnel.
Ooh, I love the drama. Well, let's kick it off with some of the quick facts then. So, as you know, the Canadian GP is our home race, eh?
Is that the home race, eh?
It's our home race, eh, bud? It's a great time.
I think we should just talk like this the whole episode, talk about hockey.
Oh, I'm all about that. It's going to be a great time, eh? I can't do it. I really can't. For anyone who thinks that's how we talk in Canada, it's not. It's really, no. Certain words we say different, but you're going to hear a lot more normal sounding things than you think if you come here for a race or just to visit, which we encourage. But some quick facts about the GP. It is hosted at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve on Ile Notre-Dame in Montreal in la belle province of Quebec. The track itself is about 4.36 kilometers going all the way around. So decent size, not one of the shortest ones that we see in the calendar. And there are 14 turns. So we've got 6 going to the left, 8 going to the right. Relatively circular track, all things considered, but there are a couple really neat circuit features that make it a lot of fun to watch the racing go down here between a couple chicanes, a couple long stretches going into a hairpin, all of that fun stuff. It is a counterclockwise circuit orientation going around that kind of lap configuration, and they do 70 laps throughout the race. So again, it is not necessarily one of the shortest tracks, but it is shorter, and we get a lot of laps in a short period of time as the race is pretty fast. The maximum speed is 350 kilometers an hour, which is crazy to think that we get to see those races and that those kinds of speeds hit consistently going around a track in a race, but very entertaining to watch. And there are 2 DRS activation zones. So in this race, the first zone is between turn 7 and 8, and the second zone is between turn 11 and turn 1 with a deactivation point at turn 3. That says turn 11 and turn 1. Should that be turn 11 and turn 12?
No, because it continues on through, it goes through 12 technically. Like it starts just after 11. Goes through 12.
It
right?
deactivates in the middle, and then
at the chicane there at the Wall of Champions, it deactivates and then goes back up to 1 through the main straight or the straight.
Hot damn. Okay, I didn't realize that. I was like, this is interesting to read, but that makes more sense now that I know about that in the Wall of Champions. And the fastest lap record here. So I know we're not doing a fastest lap recap because it is before the race, but for those curious as to what the all-time record is, it is 1 minute, 13 seconds, and 78 milliseconds. And that record was set by Valtteri Bottas with Mercedes in 2019.
I'm
So just a
gonna
couple fun facts.
do a Canadian thing here to you, Erica, and I'm gonna apologize in my notes. It's a clockwise circuit orientation. I wrote counterclockwise
I
by
was gonna say,
accident.
I was thinking about that. I was like, I was there last year. I'm pretty sure that's clockwise, not
Yeah,
counterclockwise.
I
I'm
first
I'm
turn goes
sorry.
left, then it goes
I'm sorry.
right.
I didn't catch that, eh? I didn't catch that, you know?
So that's my
I'm
bad. That
I'm so sorry.
I'm
I'm
so
just
sorry
gonna
about that.
would you like a donut? I can give you a
Maybe I
donut.
did that on purpose so that we would, go more Canadian on it. But yes, great quick facts, Erica. It's a fun race to watch. It's a tight circuit, kind of like Monaco is tight, but there are opportunities to overtake. Just have to be calculated on what you do. But a little history behind it. So the first ever Canadian Grand Prix as part of the Formula One World Championship took place in 1967, which is Canada's centennial year. Prior to that, the races between 61 and 66 were held, but not as part of the World Championship. And for the first 10 years, the races were held at Mosport Park, which is now the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park in Bowmanville,
Oh
and then
yeah.
Circuit Mont-Tremblant in Mont-Tremblant, Quebec. But with safety concerns at those circuits, the event was moved, or the race was moved in 1978 to the current home on Ile Notre Dame. Funny enough, it was called Circuit de Ile Notre Dame to start, and the island itself is a man-made island that was made that's located on the St. Lawrence River in Montreal, and it was made from 15 million tons of rock that was excavated during the construction of the Montreal's Metropolitan Underground Railroad, the subway, in 1965.
Wow.
And it was created for the World Exposition in 1967 as part of Canada's centennial. There were talks about actually like taking part of it out of the island and so that they can widen the way a little bit. But it actually was used, the river, that part of the river was used for rowing events during the 1976 Summer Olympics, and they kept it since then because the track was built around the island, and in 1978, Gilles Villeneuve with Ferrari won the first ever Canadian Grand Prix held at Circuit de Notre Dame. But unfortunately, following his tragic death at Spa in 1982, or I believe it was that year, they renamed it to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in his memory. But from its debut in 1978, it's only been absent 4 times on the F1 calendar, twice due to COVID, which is 21 and 2022, unfortunately.
Yep.
2009, due to lack of public funding from the federal, the municipal, and the provincial governments because of the recession. So it was held off the calendar because it couldn't provide the funding necessary to go forward. But 1987 is a little interesting, Erica. Do you have an idea as to why that race was held?
Don't. I can't think of why off the top of my head.
Well, it has to do with alcohol.
Oh.
But it has to do with the company's manufacture or processing the alcohol. So there was a big contract dispute in terms of the let's say the sponsorships between Labatt and Molson. And since they couldn't come to an agreement on that, they withheld the race from the schedule.
What?
I know. That rivalry is still holds the test of time. You think though, at Canadian wise, we could have like sorted it over a beer or two, right?
You would think, but those are 2 pretty big dynasties with a chokehold on the market. And funny enough, you couldn't get Molson or Labatt at the race last year. It was just Heineken and Sol.
Crazy.
But also super hilarious with the race being held off in 2020 when I was there last year. It's Father's Day weekend in Canada at the same time that the race is going on. I felt bad about not being home to celebrate with my dad. So I was like, you know what? As part of my Father's Day gift, I'm going to get him a little something. So I found these hats and it was a friggin' steal. It was $20 for one of them. And I was like, great, I'm going to get us matching hats. That'll be fun. I didn't realize until I'd already paid and was like out of the park after either qualifying or the race on Sunday that they said Canadian Grand Prix 2020 on them. Ooh. And that's why they were so cheap, was because they were merch that was made for a race that never happened.
Keep that as an item. You never know. You never know.
I have it. I personally think that's even funnier because it's like I now have this special one-off thing that I'm sure in like 50 years people are going to think is hilarious because there's probably going to be some like COVID museum somewhere where it's like, here's all the weird stuff we got up to while we were stuck in our houses, and it'll be like a sourdough loaf of bread. What was it that Dalgona coffee, and then it'll just be like this hat or something like that. Just to show that, the world stopped, but we kept being weird and also falling prey to marketing scams for hats.
I rumblings are that I have to donate my Amazon search and purchase history
Oh, really?
during that time, because it was just box upon box upon box coming to the house for the most random stuff.
Yeah.
Like I needed a mini ring light because I didn't think my camera was working that well on my work laptop. Funny enough, if I just changed the settings, I wouldn't have to pay $25 for the ring light.
Oh, the things we got up to. My God. Well, anyway, continuing on with our history, let's talk about some of the notable winners. So, if you had to guess, who would you say has the most wins at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve?
No, Schumi won quite a bit there for like the first 10 in his 10-year period. They won a couple times with Benetton and he won a couple times with Ferrari. Hamilton's won quite a bit there too. I'm going to say Hamilton.
It's funny you mentioned Schumacher and Hamilton because they are both currently tied for the most wins
Okay.
for the Canadian Grand Prix at 7 apiece. So hilarious that it's 7 with both of them having 7 World Driving Championships. But they have each taken 7 wins on this circuit. I think with Lewis, it was his first win, if I recall correctly.
It was his first win in 07.
So that's very exciting for him. Schumacher, obviously, I'm pretty sure he was crushing wins before he won in Canada. But exciting to see 2 of the greatest drivers of all time in the sport, both leading the way here in Canada. And next up, we have Nelson Piquet, who he who shall not be named in many circles these days, but he took 3 wins here at the circuit. So he is the next highest scoring at this circuit. And we have a 6-way tie for third with 2 wins apiece. Now, some of the names here you'd probably guess, but I'm not going to have you guess because a few of them are a little bit more obscure. But Pedro Rodriguez, Jackie Ickx, Jackie Stewart, Alan Jones, Ayrton Senna, and Sebastian Vettel have each taken 2 wins at the track. So a couple of those names toward the end sounding a little bit more familiar than the others, but still really exciting to see that there were people who loved racing and loved racing in Canada so much that they felt the need to not only win it once, but twice.
Well, they say, right? Like, the good things come in 3s and 7s. This time, good things come in 7s, not 3s.
Correct. That is true.
Yeah.
That is very true. And then lastly, in terms of winners, if we are talking about like teams or engine manufacturers, the one that takes the cake is Ferrari with 14.
14.
I know, it breaks my heart.
Wow.
14, yeah.
Wow.
Crazy stuff. But think about some of those names that are up there. Like a lot of them were Ferrari drivers that took home some wins for the team. So
yeah, Schumi being one of them for sure. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about anyone else, but yes, if 5 or 7 is I think a good majority of them came through Ferrari, so that's at least 5 or 6 wins there. Yeah, for Schumacher and Ferrari.
But yeah, so not only Ferrari with a ton of wins, but there's a couple other fun facts that we like to share, not just the winners, but the other stuff that we've got out there. So did you know that Jacques Villeneuve, who is Canada's only Formula One world champion, he won in 1997, never won the Canadian Grand Prix at the circuit that was named after his father. So his best result was P2. He came so close, but not quite, in 1996 when he was driving alongside Damon Hill at Williams during kind of like Williams dominance.
How crazy would that have been to like win your home GP on the circuit named after your father? That would have been Hollywood type stuff, in my opinion.
It's one of those things that you just wish for the story happened so bad because it would be so perfect. And I'm sure, I mean, anyone winning their home GP is incredibly meaningful, but at a track named after your father, who had such a history in the sport and an unfortunate kind of early end to his career, it would just be like so heartwarming to see that come about. I'm sure that would be like big family turnout. And I have to imagine just a ton of fun to be someone in the stands witnessing that. Some of the other did you knows: in 2001, the GP was unique as it had its first time 2 brothers finishing P1 and P2 in a race. Can you guess who those brothers were?
I actually know this.
Do you?
Yeah, because I was just researching Canadian Grand Prix, I think it was last year. just to get into the story. And I came across this. It was Ralph and Michael Schumacher.
Oh, no way. Okay.
But
Well,
you wouldn't have guessed. Ralph finished P1.
Hey, here we go.
There you go.
So
I
not
want to
one
get one on your brother, right? I gotta have those wins once in a while.
I love that. You just got to equal one out, scooch a little bit ahead,
Exactly.
take it home. That's fantastic. Speaking of people of similar backgrounds, German drivers have had 24 podium finishes at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Vettel being the last one to do so in 2014, finishing P3. So it's been a while since we've had someone of German descent on the podium, but a lot of good success coming from the German drivers, who we know are very prominent and very successful in the sport. And pole position has been decided by less than a tenth of a second at 4 of the previous 9 races.
That's incredible, especially considering like today's day and age and the whole hybrid, the hybrid era and the new model now. I don't think last year, I don't believe it. I think it was about 7/10.
Last
for
year was also a
Verstappen.
wet qualifying for the
Yeah.
most part, so it was a little bit. I mean, it did dry up toward the end, but it was definitely not as comparable. Who's going to come out on top as what we've seen in the past.
But we love wet qualifying sessions, don't we?
Oh, wet qualifying was so fun. It was great because we were sitting down at the hairpin turn. So as the drivers were flying and, decelerating in order to get around the hairpin, the spray coming off the back of their cars was insane to watch from a distance. It was like, I felt really bad because opposite where the hairpin is, there's a set of bleachers, and I'm pretty sure there were a few people on the one side of the track who got sprayed by the cars as they were going by, which like pretty cool to be like, Max Verstappen sprayed me with his tires. But it was already kind of like a rainy, miserable day, and the less water forcibly being thrust upon you, the better. So.
Yeah. Especially when it wasn't really anticipating it to be a wet qualifying day, and then all of a sudden the skies opened up.
And the heavens descended.
Yes.
And our last did you know is that the World Drivers' Championship has been decided at the Canadian Grand Prix before. Now, in this case, it was in 1980 with Alan Jones. And so the race used to be, for a lot of people, I'm sure they're sitting there being like, it's June. We're so early in the calendar. How is this a thing? But the race actually used to be held much later in the calendar. So it was a little bit closer to the end of the season. So folks were really pretty sure of where they were going to end up in the standings, maybe duking it out for those final few points and jockeying for position. But
how fun would it be if the Canadian Grand Prix was hosted in like November in Montreal?
If it's November in Montreal, I'm not going. I'm sorry. I love Montreal. I am from Northern Ontario and I enjoy cold weather, but like sitting outside at that track for many hours to watch things transpire is not my idea of a fun way to spend a weekend in November.
Good point. Maybe they'd have to change the beer for some whiskey and put like little bonfires in the middle of
Baileys and hot chocolate. With
a
little some like mulled wine stands going or something. I'm into it.
I mean, it could happen.
You know what? I'll put on my snow boots. I'll put on my snow pants. I'll get a whole parka and the cap and everything going. I would do it just if they had the hot boozy beverages. I take it back. I would go.
Yeah. But just imagine how cold it would be in the cockpit if like the
imagine.
wind was whipping. You feel like 1,000 daggers just forcibly hitting your body at every second in that car.
I'm curious if they held it in November, because Montreal gets a lot more snow than we do here in Ontario, and specifically Southern Ontario. Like, would there be not just the possibility of the GP getting canceled for rain, but getting canceled for snow?
That would be so cool.
Can you imagine? Like, I don't think inters or wet tires are really going to give you any help on that snow because it's so cold on the track already with the temperatures. But
legit would need like traction studs on the end of the tires to break through the potential ice breakup.
Putting snow chains on an F1 car in order to get around the track.
That would be awesome.
Okay, if anyone from F1 is listening, I've kind of decided this would be like a really fun one-off event. So much the same way that you let people just drive around the streets of Vegas for promo, I think you should do promo with a car in Montreal in the snow, even though the race is in June, because that would just be.
Or better yet, just put the race in November, put Vegas in June. it's hot, sure, whatever, but it's dry. It's a dry heat.
Mixing it up.
Mix it
Keeping it
exactly.
fresh.
So, speaking, that would be a memorable race, I think, if we did it in the snow.
Oh, for
There,
sure.
there have been other memorable races though at the Canadian Grand Prix. A few to come to mind. 1991, Nigel Mansell was leading the Canadian Grand Prix, and on the final lap, the dude just ran out of fuel.
Oh no!
And had a halted on the hairpin. Who should not be named or shall not be named, who was 57 seconds back from Mansell, flew past him and took the final win of his F1 career.
Oh my goodness.
How frustrating would that be?
That's so heartbreaking. I don't know if you would know this. Maybe this is something for us to look up, but you know how they have the regulations around having to have like a certain amount of fuel left in your car for like checking.
Well, back then it was they fueled mid-race.
Oh, right, at the pit stops they used to when you came in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got to feel bad if you're part of the pit crew and you know that you just miscalculated that slight little bit there.
Now, if you're 57 seconds up on your opponent, do you just like get out of the car at that point and just start trying to trundle yourself home? Push.
Just start pushing the car. It's still a decent way from the hairpin to the finish line, but I'd be desperate enough. I think I would try to do.
It'd be so heavy, but like you think
I'd be like, someone throw me a broom. I'd be trying to like canoe paddle my way down the.
That'd be
just
hilarious.
be like, there's no time. Let's go.
Get a few people to come onto the track and be like, go push. We've had a birthday winner though as well. 1995, Jean Alesi took his first and only F1 win at the Canadian Grand Prix on his birthday, no less, beating Michael Schumacher in the Benetton when he ran into electrical issues while in the lead.
Wow. Good for him though, winning on his birthday, and also like 1995. What a year to win!
It's a great year to win, right?
In case you didn't know, both Clary and I are born in 1995, so it's like, hey,
the best
year
year to
of
win.
F1 greatness.
Well, when Michael Schumacher won in the year you were born, I'd say that's a pretty good year.
Pretty freaking epic, dude.
Pretty sweet. Then moving forward into the next decade, 2007, as you alluded to earlier, Lewis Hamilton won his first of 103 F1 victories at the Canadian Grand Prix. This race included 4 safety cars and experienced an incredible crash by Robert. Yes. I don't know if you ever seen this. Robert Kubica going down to the hairpin, just absolutely lost it by accident, and he went flying.
He goes flying. Like the way he goes flying reminded me a little bit of Joe last year when he had that insane collision that sent him spiraling off. Which circuit was that again? I can't believe I'm blanking. Silverstone. But just one of those things where it's like kind of like a freak thing that you're not expecting, and it's just feels almost like the reaction is blown out of proportion from the car. You're like, how did we get from what was just happening to the crash that we just had?
And the crazy thing, like how safety's kind of come along too since then, because if you see the car afterwards, all tire wheels are gone, all suspension, it literally is just him in the cockpit, in the chassis, just sitting there. And I'm just like, incredible that he survived. Fun fact, he won there next year in 2008.
Which is insane.
Like to have the mental fortitude to be like, I just almost died here last year. I'm going to conquer this son of a bitch and win. That is crazy.
I know. Honestly, I mean, sports psychology is a big thing. And I feel like, especially for F1, where you're just so many times, it's very repeatable circumstances that you find yourself in, which can be like triggering for a lot of people if you have a bad crash or something like that. It just truly is a testament. I think so many people kind of downplay motorsport because they're like, oh, you're just in a car or whatever. But like, no, there's a incredible amount of physical fortitude, which we know, but also mental fortitude that you only get with very high performing athletes. And that Kubica coming back in order to win in 2008 is just proof of that.
And the final one we'll go over, it might be a little bit of a precedence to this weekend considering the weather, but 2011, if you haven't had a chance, go on YouTube, go to F1's YouTube channel, find the radio rewind from the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix. This race was just incredible. There were so many safety cars, a ton of red flags that was caused by downpour, caused by accidents, and it lasted over 4 hours.
Oh my goodness.
And the race winner was ironically not decided until the last minute. So throughout the race, Jenson Button collided with his teammate at McLaren at the time, Lewis Hamilton, on the main straight, putting the latter out of the race. But then Button received a drive-through penalty for speeding behind the safety car associated with that. So when the red flag came out, due to poor rain conditions, he was last on the grid.
Oh my goodness.
He was then able to valiantly fight through the entire grid. And I think it was like the final lap, he overtook Vettel's Red Bull, who went wide in turn 6 to then win the race 4 hours later from when it started.
Oh my goodness. That's insane. Wow.
Just to think, it's incredible. You have to watch it. It's incredible to see. I believe that was one of Ricardo's first races as well. In part
Really?
of F1. Yeah. So it's quite interesting.
Welcome to the sport. Hope you like madness.
Yeah, exactly.
Do a barrel roll.
But we couldn't go without a little history, without talking about, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, without the Wall of Champions. Now, Erica, do you know why it is called the Wall of Champions?
I actually, other than knowing it's famous for a lot of crashes taking place, I don't really know how it quite gets that name out of it.
Well, it has to do with car crashes, but it has to do with a lot of people who have crashed. So the list of drivers that have crashed into the wall at turn 13, 14, that chicane, there's a common element between them. They were Michael Schumacher, Damon Hill, Jacques Villeneuve, Jenson Button, and Sebastian Vettel. And last time I all checked, they won World Drivers' Championships.
That they did. You would
So
be correct.
dubbed the Wall of Champions. It's you were there. How crazy is that chicane in terms of the speed going in and out?
Oh, it's an incredibly fast chicane for people to come into. In fact, we had quite a few people between FP1, 2, and 3 qualifying, and even I think in the race clip the barrier. I don't think they took it out completely. I can't recall, but there were several instances where rear wheels, when people were kind of coming out of it, definitely kind of spun out and clipped it. I think Latifi clipped it at one point last year, which is unsurprising, but something that happens. And a couple other near misses and close calls as well. It's for people who maybe haven't looked up the circuit, you come out of that hairpin and you're picking up speed incredibly fast going toward the checkered line, and that chicane kind of happens to be in the middle of two decent kind of straights where you can pick up a lot of speed if you're really going at it. So it would take a lot of finesse maneuvering and skill in order to keep your car under control. And again, this is where it's like these guys are athletes. Like, you are fighting the car with everything you have in a moment like that, I have to believe.
Well, that's incredible. Well, that's our little history of the Canadian Grand Prix. Now we can go into our preview. So, Erica, you were there last year at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve for the return of the Canadian Grand Prix. Having a full perspective of the track, what surprised you, or what did you not anticipate about the track that, seeing it on TV, what were your kind of like wow moments of the track? And then kind of, where do you think the best opportunities for overtaking would be this weekend for these drivers?
That is a great question. And so one of the things that surprised me the most was the opportunity for cars with great straight line speed to dominate here. At this point last year, we were impressed with the Alpine, but I don't think we really realized just how racy it was with the straight line speed. And I was shocked that Lewis and George were struggling to overtake people like Fernando. Like, they would catch them super close on that hairpin turn where we were sitting, and then the Alpine would just take off from there. It was very favorable to those kinds of cars. It was also part of why I think, because Charles had a grid penalty last year and he wasn't really able to fight his way through the pack the way he hoped. The Ferrari was very fast, but it was not the best performing with straight line speed. So I definitely still see this as being very favorable to a Red Bull. It'll be interesting to see how Mercedes performs with some of the upgrades to the car, and we've seen them, kind of turn things around in the last race. But I think some of the best passing opportunities, we saw some fancy stuff happening at that hairpin because everyone kind of slows down. You have the opportunity to maybe close a gap if you're smart you see people lunging on the inside. You see folks trying to take a wide turn going around just to see if they can maybe pull some kind of crazy thing out. We saw K-Meg try that on a couple of occasions last year, but I think one of the like major spots, I'm trying to see, I don't have this, why is this map not showing me the turns? Because it's easier if I just tell you where the turn is, but it's kind of coming around it's in the first half of the circuit, I would say.
Is it the semicircle coming out of 1?
You would be correct. I feel like that is a half decent spot.
Well, that's kind of a hairpin in a way.
Sorry, not coming out of 1, but it's almost near like turn 6. That
Oh,
was another
yes.
spot. Because you have a little bit of a turn, like a small-ish chicane, like coming 3, 4. You've got a bit of a turn around 5, and then you have to slow down a little bit more with 6 going into a relatively steep turn in 7. So it's a lot of instances where you're fast off the line and then you don't have opportunities to pick up a lot of speed right after. Because the semicircle at 1, also a spot where we saw some action. But coming into turn 6, you've really got to watch it because you have 2 very almost like 90-degree turns that you need to make with very minimal, kind of allowances for error there. There's not a lot of runoff there on the track either, like we see in some other spots. So you really have to be pretty precise with what you're doing. So sometimes folks are a little bit overcautious about what they're doing, which gives an opportunity for someone who's a little bit more risk taking to come through and overtake.
Not that I want to wish ill upon Ricci being there this weekend, but according to the forecast, it is supposed to rain Friday, rain Saturday, and rain Sunday.
Oh,
I'm kind of hoping there's a wet race because of how dynamic the racing could be in some of these slower turns. Like, turn 6, that is a great opportunity. If you can't control the car fast enough, because it's a slingshot from 5 to 6, but from the looks of it on TV, you can't control it. You're going to be going into that runoff area, and a great opportunity for people to do some overtaking and special maneuvers. And then at the hairpin at 10, that's got it. In the rain, that will create some great opportunities for overtaking.
Even when the track was dry, there were a lot of people who kind of were gunning it too hard into the hairpin and ended up going off track. So we saw some people really go flying during qualifying when it was still wet for Q1 and Q2, to the point where we actually had one of the Haas's almost smack into the barriers right in front of kind of where Ricci and them were sitting, like a complete sort of spin out. So definitely, I think, an opportunity to provide some, hopefully not a 4-hour race, obviously not going to happen again, but it would add, I think, a layer of complexity. And I always love the wet races because, as people say all over the sport, it really shows you the talent of all the drivers because it kind of equalizes what folks can do in their cars a little bit more, especially in the midfield.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would just love to see it because it's so fun.
So Ricci will be this weekend in the Lance Stroll section. Another reason why I want a wet race too is because, take it back to last week. Nick Taylor, a Canadian golfer, won the RBC Canadian Open 69, first time in 69 years that a Canadian won on like a miraculous 72-foot putt in the playoff. I know that might not mean to a lot of people, but that's just an incredible moment for Canadian golf. Right, in a
just
way.
In general, like that's an insane putt to hit.
72 feet, right? Think about how that's so long. From that, I have been manifesting all week for Lance Stroll, who is a great driver in the wet, to win the home GP for the first time since 78 when Gilles Villeneuve did it. Oh my gosh, storybook ending. Please, F1 gods, I don't care, make that happen.
I would just love that. That would be like such a fun story. I'm also curious if last year he threw hats out into the crowd, like we all got them for sitting in the Lance Stroll grandstand, but I feel like it would make it even more special if you got to like have one of those hats and wear it while a Canadian driver. Even if he just got a podium, I'd be really happy.
Oh, because he's from Montreal. It would be great. But in your opinion this weekend, Erica, who do you think are going to be the winners and losers of the Canadian Grand Prix?
For sure. I think notable standout, I think Max is still going to be a force to be reckoned with. He's just looked so comfortable at this circuit in the past. The wet didn't seem to deter him at all last year, and he's just been crushing it with the car that they have this year. So I think he's definitely going to be winning unless something mechanical or, there's a racing incident happens to come into play. Like you said, with the skill driving in the rain, if we see that, I also just think we're going to see a very racy and competitive Lewis Hamilton after what we saw from Mercedes last time. We know this guy is hungry. We know he's still talented and really can pull it out. And especially if we have the equalizer, he's one of those drivers where even if he were in a less good car, like even the car they had last year, if it had been race day and raining, I would have been like, yeah, I expect Lewis Hamilton to be toward the front of the pack. He's just so comfortable under those conditions. And I'm curious to see how Alonso will do. I think he's still going to be putting the pressure on. I'm hoping he can nudge George Russell out and get another podium. That would be fun. But I do think that with all of the adrenaline going on, I think Lance is going to be pretty competitive and he's going to be guns ablaze really going into it. I just hope that he is making smart choices and not letting the emotion of the weekend kind of get the better of him, because it is possible that, sometimes that can cause you to make some less than smart decisions at some critical junctures, which we have seen him do in the past, even at not home races. So if he is leaning into the fun but still keeping like a level head, I think he will do pretty well and maybe come out a little further ahead in the pack than we've seen him do so far this season.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how it's going to go, because I obviously think Max is going to have a fantastic weekend, as you alluded to, but I also think this might be a great opportunity for Checo to kind of shut up the naysayers a little bit. Some of the media to say, hey, look, like I'm still in this fight. And maybe he actually has a dominant weekend. You'll never know. Like it could, I think he could be a surprise driver this weekend, all things considered, and really push Max for P1. It's tight. It's kind of like Monaco in that sense. He drives well these types of tracks. I know that he had a tough race last year with the gearbox issue, but I think I think this weekend could bowl well for Checo. I want to say that it might be a tough weekend for Charles Leclerc.
I have to agree with you on that one.
I think they're gonna Ferrari's desperate in the sense that they're gonna need to push. Well, they've had self-induced or team-induced errors in the last 6 to 7 races, and I think they might push a little too hard this weekend to try and get some big points, and that might affect them in a way. So I think, considering Charles had issues, I keep referring back to Monaco, but again, it's a very tight circuit. He had troubles last year fighting through the field, and if he gets back stuck in the field again, I don't think Ferrari have that pace to really be able to push for a podium finish in that regards, especially with Charles Leclerc. But hopefully not, considering that Ricci's there this weekend and he wants to see his boys do well. But you never know. I guess my kind of dark horse for the weekend will be Lance Stroll.
Yeah.
I think if this is his time to shine, it's his time to shine now.
Yeah.
Apparently there's a lot of performance upgrades coming to that Aston Martin this weekend.
Okay.
I have a good feeling that Alonso is going to do well. He's vowed that he will not finish outside of the podium for the rest of the season, which is quite a big ball statement if you ask me.
Bold statement to be making. Wow.
Exactly. So let's see. Maybe Lance will then be able to convert the car. He finished better than Alonso in the previous race, pinning P6 over P7. So we will we'll see how it goes. But that are my dark horse. He's my dark horse for the weekend.
Yeah. One other thing I'm curious to see, after a promising qualifying last time with Lando Norris, is because he's been pretty talented driving in bad weather too.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's able to, I still don't know how he pulled the McLaren into P3 during qualifying. I'm curious to see how he'll do. So maybe there is a little bit more pace coming in that McLaren to begin with, but also if we've got a little bit of equalization going on with the rain, how will he fare? I would like to see that. I mean, obviously that's me as a deluded McLaren fan, really hoping things go well. But it would also be really great just to see a little bit more. I mean, this is what we all wanted with the new era of cars coming in last year. We wanted to see more variety in terms of who was fighting for podiums and kind of jockeying for position near the top. So to see a little bit of orange thrown into the mix wouldn't hurt.
And I concur with that. I also think this weekend is a big weekend for Mercedes, considering how this is a very rear wheel package track. And, they did well with the upgrades in Barcelona, but this is a very different track here compared to Barcelona. So let's see how Mercedes go. They could take a step back. Who knows? They could be up the forefront. Like, this is a really big weekend for a lot of teams, I think. Aston Martin pushing back for that P2 spot over Mercedes. Have Mercedes been able to figure out the car and then, push and kind of be that established P2 team that could really maybe at the end of the season try and track down Red Bull? And it's kind of put up or shut up time for Checo at this part of the season, right? Kind of give Christian a thought as to, maybe it's not now we don't think of driver one and driver two this early in the season. Fight for some big key points over your teammate and really push for the chance to be that number one driver again. We'll see how it goes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So that is our Canadian Grand Prix preview. Thank you for those who have made it this far in the episode. As a result, we're going to give you a little bit of tidbit about discussing about the week that was. And there were some hot comments that came from one of the drivers in the Mercedes garage.
Ooh.
Could you guess who that driver would be?
If I had to guess about who the drama queen was this week, I would say it's handsome man George Russell.
It is indeed handsome man George Russell, the man who partied hard with Man City after winning the Champions League this past weekend. But he made a comment on the current F1 grid with regards to wheel-to-wheel racing, and it's quite interesting. He goes, there may be 3 drivers on the grid who you wouldn't feel comfortable going against. There's a trust between most of the drivers. I don't think those unnamed drivers have the spatial awareness of others.
Oh, hot damn.
Oh, that's a spicy comment to make.
That is spicy.
Now, I commend George because the first step in the 12-step process is to identify your problem. And it's so good for him to identify him as one of the 3 drivers who have this spatial awareness. Mr. Torpedo himself.
Mr. Spearfisher from last season, that's for sure.
I'm like, you can't make these comments when you, like, Coda, for instance, just absolutely spearfishing it into, like, Alonso or Carlos on turn 1.
I think it was Carlos that he went into, didn't he? Just, like, absolutely took out the middle of his car.
And then, Singapore pretty much pushing, I think it was Schumacher off track and saying, oh, you had a ton of room. No, dude, you condensed it quite a bit. So good to see that he's, that self-awareness in that case, ironically, of identifying himself as that. Who do you think the other 2 are, would you say?
I'm so curious to know because I haven't really seen it this year, but I remember last year with Lance Stroll, we had a couple of incidences where he wasn't really using his mirrors probably as effectively as he could, and he caused some incidents. I'm curious if after Monaco, maybe he's thinking about Logan Sargent, because there were a couple of, you could really tell that he didn't necessarily have like the comfort under him that some of the other drivers did on that circuit, and he had a couple little scuff ups. I don't know if maybe here's the thing. Do we think he's talking about spatial awareness because he's trying to be like, oh, these people are like young and not talented, or is he just a little princess and he doesn't like that some people are aggressive and willing to fight for position and aren't willing to yield? Because if it's the latter, I think he's probably talking about Alonso too, because Alonso's not someone who's going to give it up really fast. And he's definitely had a couple wheel bumps and a couple of incidences with the Mercedes cars this season and a few others as well.
And if he's talking about aggressiveness, I think Max is also someone he's also talking about. Considering they've had an incident this year already when Max called him a head.
Yeah.
because of how tight they
I
were.
forgot about that.
I
Yeah.
believe that was in it was in Baku, right? Just I don't know. Like, why do you? I understand. I don't understand the point of making these comments and keeping it so cryptic. Like I understand the whole drama aspect, but where does this get you at the end of the day?
Just think about if you did this at work. Like if you were talking to your boss or someone in another department and you were just like, oh yeah, like our team in accounting, we're all very high performers, but there's three of us who I don't think are as numerically oriented as the rest of us. Like people would be like, what are you trying to gain by saying this? Like, why are you telling me this and making this comment? What do you hope to gain from this scenario?
No, and I think he's just trying to create some drama and not as much. There hasn't been as much drama these past few races, so he's trying to just stir the pot a little bit, which
And
I
give
kind of
DTS
respect in a
something to
way
film.
because he just doing it for the cameras. I get it. He also
Trying
had
to
a
give
comment on
DTLs a little bit of story.
Yeah, exactly. He also had a comment on Max Verstappen saying that now Max is probably less aggressive than he's ever been in the past because he's not in a position where he needs to be aggressive, considering how fast that car is. We saw in 2021 there were some incidents between Russell's teammate now Hamilton and Max with regards to aggressive driving, and it led to a couple crashes. Silverstone being one, Monza being another.
Oh, yeah, that one. Jeez.
Do you think? Well, I know Max isn't going to give a shit. Put it that way. But with Max being less aggressive, do you think that's going to hurt him in the future? If cars start to come now tighter up to the Red Bull car, being considered less aggressive, because he's not fighting week in week out with having to fight for positions.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think it could. I mean, he's very talented and he's a very practiced, skilled driver. So I think that he's probably able to turn on the jets when he needs to in order to maintain position and stay defensive and aggressive. But yeah, he won't be as practiced as someone who maybe struggled a little bit more in like a P6, P7 spot who now has a car that's launching them a little bit higher up the grid. The one thing though is that he's been so ahead of the rest of the pack. It's hard to say, has he lost that aggression and that ability to fight? Like it's just untested. And so it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat at this point. I think it's like, has he lost the aggression because he's not using it, or is it just the aggression is like who he is as a driver and we just haven't had to see it, so we think that it's going away type deal.
Yeah, and I know he's fought through the pack a couple times this year to get back to P1, and I'm don't really going to consider that as really aggressive driving because he knows he has a better car and
Yeah.
he can be more calculated in his risk taking because he knows at the end of the day he's going to get back up to the front of the pack no matter where he is at the race. So, yeah, time will tell, but we really, I guess in the sense we really need that competitor to really be able to fight against Red Bull right now and to see how to test that theory to the play.
And it's also that he's maturing, right? Like the guy's been racing for several years now. He's learned a lot and is just smarter. Like you were saying, he can be more calculated and smart with the risks he's taking and what he's doing on the track. So, maybe he doesn't need to be aggressive because he can just be cool, calm, and calculated instead.
Well, fair enough. I appreciate that. Well, sticking with the Mercedes theme, we're going to go to another team who's at the back of the grid, but has the Mercedes engine. James Vowles made an interesting comment about Williams' operating systems and just overall operations itself. And he revealed that Williams' team's facilities, like portions that are quote unquote 20 years out of date.
Oh my gosh.
20 years out of date.
Well, I mean, I feel like that's a given the smooth bottom car we saw, but I mean, that's wild. I mean, it would make sense given how their performance has been over the last 20 years that they've kind of fallen behind just in the facility to build the car, nevertheless, what the car is itself, right?
But like what surprised me is Williams had always been a team, again, low budget, didn't have a lot of money since being a private team, but they were so innovative in their ways that they maximized the efficiency of every dollar that they put into their facilities. you know, especially with winning those championships back in the 90s, right? It kind of mind boggles. It's just mind boggling that they didn't carry that over into the modern day of Formula One and really trying to innovate at every step to keep maximizing that dollar when competing against the teams. And, you know, we were joking last week, oh, look at the undercarriage. No wonder why they're terrible. I'm like, well, when their stuff's 20 years out of date, no freaking shit. Like, holy smokes.
Yeah, there's no way if the things that you're using to build the car are going to be outdated, your car itself is going to be outdated. That's just kind of a given unless you have someone who's able to come in with that creativity, that bootstrapping, being able to innovate on a budget. And it seems like they're missing that. I mean, we've known that they have been for a while, but this is just further proof that they're really missing the mark.
And I think now even more today, just hearing and reading about that, is that what a great move by Williams to bring in James as part of their chief engineering and, you know, chief, you know, team principal, coming from such a high-tech team at Mercedes itself. And now kind of being able to bring them into the modern age of Formula One here with what he's seen. I think it's just going to bode well for Williams down the road. You know, in the next five to 10 years, being able to update their systems and whatnot. So I thought that was quite eye-opening when reading that about how, you know, some of the elements are 20 years out of date.
Wow. That's shocking. That's worse than I would have thought.
Yeah, it's kind of like, imagine just going there from like Mercedes and you walk in the doors at the Williams Performance facilities and you're like, what is going on here?
That would be like someone ripping an iPhone out of your hand and handing you a Nokia and being like, do your job on this. And you'd be like, well, I can't.
Go back to that T9 text.
Yeah, exactly. Play Snake on your phone because that's the only game on it.
I mean, who still doesn't play Snake on your phone? But also, so Eric, did you see anything else additionally in the week that was? Any gossip?
I feel like we're hitting the highlights. I mean, I could really kind of lean into the fact that I don't think it's spoken about enough that Charles Leclerc kind of has a new girlfriend, but it's being kept like real down low.
He does? I did not know this.
Yeah, so he did an interview in French ahead of Monaco, and they were kind of like, your name, the team you race for, are you single? And he said en couple, which means that he's coupled up. From the rumors I've heard, it might be a friend of Pierre Gasly's girlfriend, Kiki Gomes, but she is more of like a low-key person, doesn't kind of like George Russell's girlfriend, like has her own stuff she does, kind of wants to keep it under the radar. So is it true? Is it not? That's my little bit of gossip. Sorry for all the Leclerc baddies who are, you know, fans of his and hoping to jump on that bandwagon, but we may have missed the boat.
Speaking of Leclerc, I can't believe the fact that Giovinazzi has won more titles with Ferrari than Leclerc has.
I mean, point. Kudos to him for the men's. That's a big deal.
If you look at that Sauber team from a few years ago, or that Marcus Ericsson is now an Indy 500 winner. Giovinazzi is now a Le Mans winner, and Pascal Wehrlein is leading the Formula E championship, and Charles Leclerc has done nothing. That's so like
the poor baby.
Oh, it's just so tough. Oh, but on that note,
maybe Ferrari will have a better weekend than we hope, and it'll put the light back in his eyes.
Exactly.
Who knows?
But everyone, that is season 3, episode 14 of the F1 podcast. Erica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Cleary. I had a great time chatting.
We had honestly, it was an absolute pleasure. Again, yes, the Canadian Grand Prix this weekend, as John mentioned, he will be there at the Atlanta Stroll section there in the grandstand there all weekend. So reach out to us on Instagram, DM us at f1.podcast if you want to meet up with John. Also follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as XPG's YouTube channel for some great Canada. I imagine he'll have the GoPro out this weekend, doing some great content in Montreal. But with that said, Erica, why don't you send us off our merry way for this episode?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for yet another episode of the F1 podcast. I am Erica, and I was joined today by one of our co-hosts, Cleary. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. If you'd like to keep up to date with everything that we are doing, you can find us on YouTube at XReachy, and you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Instagram, giving us a follow at f1.podcast on the Instagram platform. We post a lot of updates there, and we'll be sharing whenever we post a new pod, as well as some of the other fun goings on that we have in the near future. With that said, have a fantastic rest of your week. We hope you look forward to what will promise to be a really great Canadian Grand Prix, and we will catch you next week with a recap of the race and as we look forward into the rest of the season. Take care and have a great day.